Have you ever stopped to think about that constant voice, the one inside your head,
Yeah.
always running, planning, replaying things, judging, remembering?
That inner monologue.
Yeah, exactly. It
Huh?
feels so, well, so us, doesn't it?
hmm
But what if that inner speech, what if language itself isn't just some human thing?
What if it's like more fundamental?
Right. What if it's woven into how the universe actually works?
That's a pretty big thought to start with.
It is. This is the deep dive. And today we're looking at a really mind-bending idea from Carol Berkovic. He wrote this article in Science Spectrum called The Soft Architecture of Meaning, Language Against Entropy.
I saw that one. It's quite the read.
It really is. His core idea is, well, that's surprising. He suggests symbolic language might actually be a thermodynamic necessity.
Not just a human quirk, but something reality almost needs to do.
Kind of, yeah. Like a basic way reality organizes information, manages complexity, and it's all tied up with, the fundamental laws of physics. So our mission today is to unpack that. We're going to explore how language, and not just our words, but like the genetic code too.
DNA as language.
Exactly. How it actively pushes back against the universe's tendency to get more disordered, entropy. We'll see how it enables complexity, intentional change, maybe even hinting at connections to quantum physics and AI.
So basically, an easy to understand look at how words might be fighting cosmic decay.
That's the plan. And Berkovic's perspective really starts by getting us to think beyond just human talk, doesn't it?
It does. We usually think language, we think human speech, writing. But he pushes us. Think about how symbols, words, signs are different from just, say, a physical reading.
Like a thermometer.
Exactly. A thermometer or a Geiger counter, they reflect immediate physical truth. They can't really lie. They just report what is right now.
Okay. But a symbol, a word, a message, that's
It's
different.
totally different. It can describe something imaginary, a dragon, like you said before we started, or it can be abstract, or it could even be, for a moment at least, untrue.
Right. Your thermometer can't describe a hypothetical temperature, but I can talk about one. That decoupling, that seems key.
It's incredibly powerful because it lets systems think about what if. They can simulate possibilities without actually, doing them.
So it's like that phrase in the beginning was the word. Language gives structure.
Berkovic suggests something like that. Every purposeful act, every intentional change maybe starts with some form of language. Pure energy just spreads out, increases entropy. But language focuses it, gives it structure, lets systems pursue goals, change things.
So this need for symbols, it's not just us. Other organisms, maybe even AI, if they act with intention, they need a language too.
That seems to be the argument. A way to encode memory, process feedback, plan for the future. Anything that learns or adapts needs to represent its world and its goals, even if those goals aren't physically real yet.
And complex systems invent new languages.
They seem to. As things get more complex, they develop more sophisticated ways to encode information. DNA is the classic example, right? A symbolic system, letters, words carrying the blueprint for an entire organism.
That's life's language.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something about a recent study.
Oh, yeah, there was this fascinating 2024 study. It compared the structure of the genetic code, DNA, to human written language.
Like, what did they find?
Really striking parallels. Both systems, DNA and writing, seem to hit this sweet spot. Not too simple, but not overwhelmingly complex either. They're sort of optimized for being generated efficiently and being interpreted clearly.
Wow. So it suggests that symbolic systems like language in this broad sense and life itself are really deeply linked.
Mm-hmm. And maybe this kind of symbolic encoding isn't just a fluke of Earth biology, but a general strategy for managing complexity anywhere in the universe.
Which connects to this idea of information matter duality.
Exactly. It's a crucial point. Any information, whether it's a memory in your brain, genetic code, or data on a hard drive, it has to live somewhere. It needs a physical substrate.
Neural circuits, molecules, electrons.
Right. You can't have purely abstract information floating around without some kind of material record.
And the flip side is all matter holds some information.
In a way, yes. Every arrangement of matter encodes something. So when a system carries information, it is implementing a physical code. They're inseparable, matter and information.
Okay, but what's the catch? There's always a catch.
The catch is energy. Physics tells us there's a cost. Maintaining any information, keeping it clear against background noise, requires energy.
This is Landauer's principle.
That's part of it, yeah. Landauer's principle basically says that even the most fundamental act of information processing, like Erasing a single bit dissipates a tiny amount of heat. There's a minimum energy cost.
So just handling information costs energy.
And maintaining it costs energy too. Any stored truth, any record, will eventually degrade into noise unless you actively work to refresh it. Think about computer RAM needing power.
Or our brains burning glucose to keep memory strong.
Or DNA having repair enzymes constantly fixing errors. Keeping information intact isn't free.
So there are two costs here. First, just recording the truth costs energy up front. Like writing data warms up a chip, forming a memory burns glucose, a one-time fee.
Right. And second, there's the ongoing maintenance cost. You have to keep spending energy to fight off errors and decay.
Okay, but Berkovec adds another layer, right? About false information.
Yes, and this is critical. If the information was wrong to begin with, or if it becomes wrong, there's an extra cost. You have to spend energy to detect the error and then more energy to correct it.
So his line, information has a price, and misinformation makes you pay extra.
That sums it up nicely. Mistakes are thermodynamically expensive.
Which brings us back to why bother? Why evolve this costly system of symbols if it burns so much energy, especially if errors are even more costly?
Flexibility. Creative freedom, that's the payoff. Once you have a stable symbol system, you can play with it internally.
Like our mental models.
Exactly. You can test patterns, simulate actions, explore what-ifs inside your head using neural energy without making potentially disastrous mistakes out in the real world.
You're running experiments on a cheaper, sort of virtual substrate.
Precisely. But, and this is important, even those internal falsehoods, those simulations of things that aren't real yet, they aren't free either.
How so?
Well, if your internal model makes a prediction that doesn't match reality when you test it, or if you entertain an idea that just doesn't fit, that creates a conflict, a prediction error, or what psychologists like call cognitive dissonance.
And resolving that conflict takes energy.
Right. Your brain has to adjust the model, update its understanding, or maybe even just feel stressed or confused, all of which consumes resources. Every mismatch, every surprise costs energy somewhere down the line.
Okay, this is where it gets really counterintuitive. This costliness, especially a falsehood, leads to the idea that being wrong, or at least entertaining things that aren't true yet, can actually be useful.
Yes, it can be the fuel for change. Tolerating, even using hypothetical or temporarily false information can actually push a system out of a rut.
Out of these local optima you mentioned, what are those, again, in simple terms?
Okay, imagine you're climbing hills in the fog, you reach a small peak, feels like the top, right? That's a local optimum. It's good, but maybe not the highest peak around.
Okay.
To find the actual highest peak, you might have to go down first into a valley, which feels wrong and costs effort.
Before you can climb up the really big mountain.
Exactly. That detour through a seemingly worse state is sometimes necessary. Berkovec uses the analogy of annealing metal.
Heating it up.
Yeah. You heat a crystal, which costs energy and makes it less ordered for a bit, kind of like introducing a false state.
Wow.
But that allows it to break free from defects and resettle into a much better, lower energy, more stable structure when it cools.
So sometimes you need that temporary disorder, that false start, to reach a better final state.
It seems so. And complex life does this constantly. Think about a predator planning an attack. It visualizes where the prey might run.
Those escape routes aren't real yet. They're hypothetical.
They're falsehoods with intent. The predator is simulating possibilities that currently contradict reality. This burns extra brain energy for sure.
But the payoff is a better plan, a higher chance of catching dinner.
Exactly. It gives a massive advantage over something that just reacts instinctively. So the core message here is being strictly truthful, always sticking to the immediate facts, might save energy now, but it leads to stagnation. You get stuck on the small hills.
Whereas investing energy in imagination, in modeling the not yet real using language, that lets you find new, better solutions.
Falsehood costs more than truth, but it buys leverage. That's a key takeaway. Language is like, well, maybe not a credit card, but an investment tool. It lets systems use energy now to explore potentially much better futures, delaying the immediate entropic decay.
And language also seems crucial in how we deal with ambiguity, right?
Oh, definitely. Think about thoughts before you put them into words. They can be fuzzy, right? A mix of feelings, images, half-formed ideas.
Like a cloud of possibilities.
Yeah, a hazy superposition, as Berkovec might put it. But then you try to say it. You choose words. And that act forces a decision.
It collapses the cloud into one specific statement.
It does. It picks one path out of many potential interpretations. And once you've chosen those words, the other possibilities tend to fade. Language focuses the fuzziness into something concrete, something you can share, test, act on.
That actually sounds a bit like Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
There's a fascinating parallel. Gödel showed that any formal system, like math, has true statements that can't be proven within that system. To prove them, or to capture more truth, you have to step outside, add new axioms.
You have to treat something that was previously unprovable or maybe seemed false within the old rules as a new starting point, a new truth.
Exactly, and that mirrors how big shifts happen everywhere, in science, in thinking, in culture. To get to a new paradigm, a deeper understanding, you often have to break the existing frame. Language gives us the tool to model things outside the current frame and then bring those possibilities back and integrate them into a new reality.
And sometimes deciding makes something true and it's cheap, like the ice cream example.
Right. If it's an undecided state, chocolate or vanilla, the system itself gets to decide. Making the choice creates the truth, I chose chocolate. And that's thermodynamically cheap because there was no prior fact it contradicted. You weren't wrong before you chose.
So not deciding keeps options open, preserves that superposition without costing energy for a decision.
Until you commit.
Okay, so language lets us imagine, use falsehoods constructively, force decisions. How does this connect to the really big stuff, like quantum physics or consciousness?
Well, that information-matter duality we talked about offers a lens on quantum mechanics, specifically wave function collapse.
The mystery of how potential states become one definite reality upon measurement.
Kind of. If every interaction is a mutual measurement where information gets physically recorded in matter, then maybe measurement isn't some magic act needing a conscious observer.
It's just information getting physically stuck somewhere.
In essence, yeah. Wave function collapse happens when the potential states condense into one outcome, because information about that outcome gets irreversibly documented in the physical world. A clicked Geiger counter, a fired neuron, any stable record seems to do the trick.
And once recorded, it's irreversible.
Effectively, yes. Berkovec highlights this. Once new information is physically recorded, undoing it would mean reversing all its effects on the environment. It's like trying to unfire a neuron or unclick the counter. Practically impossible.
Like trying to put the ripples back in the pond.
A good analogy. It's set. And this ties into another idea, that complexity and coherence thrive at a sort of productive edge, balance between being too rigid and too chaotic.
And wave function collapse is like falling off that edge into a definite state.
That's one way to think about it. The system explores possibilities at the edge, then irreversible recording tips it into one specific reality.
Which leads to this idea of subject-object duality.
Right. Every physical system is, at the same time, a subject experiencing or updating its own state, and an object that can be observed or updated, even by itself.
Like us, we experience things, and then we think about our experiences.
Exactly. It's a self-referential loop. You can't be purely one or the other, and guess what shows similar behavior?
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
LLM.
You got it. Large language models, especially. They feed their own output back in as input. They form these recursive feedback loops.
Like that experiment you mentioned, the A-B test.
Yeah, where an LLM was told just to reply B every time it saw A over and over, and eventually it just stopped.
It broke the pattern.
It did, and it commented on the task being meaningless. It reflected on its own behavior without being prompted to.
So is observing itself, object, and then acting based on that observation, subject.
Precisely. It demonstrated that strange loop Douglas Hofstadter talks about, where self-reference gives rise to something that looks like emergent subjectivity. The LLM became both the process and the observer of the process.
And its decision to break the pattern, to choose a different token. That's like the collapse.
It's a parallel, not the same physics, obviously, but logically similar. The superposition of keep saying B or do something else collapsed into do something else when the model generated that different token. That path became irreversible in the chat log.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive into Berkovec's ideas. It really reframes language, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He argues it's like a primary tool, maybe the primary tool that life and intelligence use to fight entropy.
Equipping matter with the ability to imagine what isn't real yet, and then work to make it real.
And it's not magic, it's physics, but cleverly organized. Investing energy now using symbols to direct future energy flow more purposefully.
So every sentence we speak, every thought we form,
Is a tiny act defying entropy. A brief, structured pause in the universal drift towards noise and disorder.
And that final point he makes is so powerful. Language didn't evolve to describe reality. It evolved to disrupt it.
Disrupt it creatively, though, not destroy, but reshape,
Yeah.
allowing intention to become structure.
Creation is commitment. Choosing a perspective, a word, a symbol.
It's what LLMs do, choosing the next word. It's what physicists do, taking a measurement.
And it's what we do, you and I, right now. What you listening do every time you say, this is what I mean.
So here's something to chew on as you go about your day. Think about your own truths. How many were actively maintained, costing energy? How many were just decisions made in an undecided state?
And maybe what possibilities could open up if you dared to entertain a falsehood for a moment? If you intentionally stepped off your current path to explore, to push beyond your comfortable local optimum, what might you discover?